My family demanded I skip graduation to babysit, so I cut them off when they asked for money. My family expected me to skip my college graduation to babysit my nephew because they were going on a trip. When I didn't, they said I was selfish and cut me off. But years later, they need elderly care help. I'm still selfish. Conveniently, hey Reddit, buckle up because this is the story of how my family expected me to miss my college graduation to watch my sister's kid while they all went on vacation, then cut me off when I refused. Fast forward 10 years and suddenly I'm not so selfish anymore, now that they need help with elderly care. Funny how that works. So, I'm 32 now, but this mess started when I was 22 and about to graduate college. To understand why this whole situation is so messed up, I need to give you some context about my family dynamic, which has been garbage since I was about 12. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. My sister Rachel is 2 years younger than me, and my brother Kevin is 4 years younger. From the moment Kevin was born, it was pretty obvious who the favorite was. Golden child syndrome doesn't even begin to cover it. This kid could literally set the house on fire, and my parents would blame the matches for being too flammable. Growing up, I was the responsible one. That's code for, we expect you to raise yourself while we focus on your siblings. When I was in high school, I had a part-time job at a local grocery store, maintained a 3.9 grade point average, and did my own laundry, made my own lunches, and generally existed as a self-sufficient unit. Meanwhile, Rachel got driven to her dance classes 3 times a week, and Kevin got help with his homework every single night. When the first asked for help with calculus once, my dad told me to figure it out because that's what smart kids do. The favoritism wasn't subtle. For my 16th birthday, I got a $50 gift card to Target and a card that said happy birthday with no personal message. For Rachel's 16th, they threw her a surprise party with 50 people, rented a bounce house for a 16-year-old, and bought her a MacBook Pro. When I pointed out the discrepancy, my mom hit me with the classic, "We were in a different financial situation then." Yeah, 2 years made all the difference. I learned early on that complaining got me nowhere. So I just put my head down and focused on getting out. My plan was simple: get good grades, get scholarships, go to college, and never look back. And that's exactly what I did. I busted my rear end in high school and got accepted to a decent state university about 3 hours away from home. Not Ivy League or anything, but a solid school with a good engineering program. I got a partial academic scholarship that covered about 60% of tuition, and I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover the rest plus living expenses. My parents contributed exactly 0 to my education because, as my dad explained, we need to save for Rachel and Kevin's college funds, right? Because they definitely needed more help than I did. The scholarship was renewable as long as I maintained a 3.5 grade point average, which meant I couldn't slack off for even a semester. I worked at a campus bookstore 20 hours a week and picked up weekend shifts at a local restaurant washing dishes. Between classes, studying, and working, I was pulling 70-hour weeks consistently. My freshman year roommate thought I was insane. He'd invite me to parties, and I'd have to decline because I had a shift. He'd ask if I wanted to grab pizza, and I'd pull out my ramen because that's all I could afford. Meanwhile, back home, Rachel was living large on my parents' dime. She had a car they'd bought her for her 16th birthday. Nothing fancy, but reliable. She had a phone with unlimited data that they paid for. She had a credit card for emergencies that she used for regular shopping. When I needed a car in high school, my dad told me to save up and buy one myself, which I did. A 15-year-old piece of junk that died 2 months after I bought it. I never got another one until I graduated college and could afford something decent. Rachel breezed through her first semester of community college, partying most weekends, posting Instagram photos from clubs and concerts. My mom would comment on every photo about how beautiful she looked, how proud she was. When I posted a photo of me at a study group, I'd get nothing. Radio silence. Then Rachel got pregnant halfway through her 2nd semester. She was 19, dating this 23-year-old loser named Jake, who worked part-time at a vape shop and thought he was going to be a rapper. No joke. This dude had a SoundCloud with maybe 40 followers and a dream. Rachel thought he was going to make it big, and she was going to be his video girl, or whatever. They'd been dating for 4 months when she got pregnant. Jake stuck around for about 3 weeks after she told him. Then he ghosted her completely, blocked her number, deleted his social media, banished. Rumor was he'd moved back in with his mom in another state. Rachel was devastated. My parents were furious at Jake, but weirdly okay with the whole situation. My mom actually said, "Everything happens for a reason. This baby will bring so much joy to our lives." Notice she said our lives, not Rachel's life. They were already planning to make this kid part of their lives. Not just their grandchild, but basically their do-over baby. Rachel dropped out of community college immediately. She moved back home full-time, and my parents converted my old bedroom into a nursery. They bought thousands of dollars worth of baby stuff, crib, changing table, clothes, toys, and one of those fancy strollers that cost more than my monthly rent. When I came home for winter break my sophomore year, all my stuff had been boxed up and shoved in the garage. My childhood bedroom had been completely transformed. We needed the space, my mom explained when I asked. You're not living here anymore anyway. Meanwhile, Kevin still had his room exactly as he'd left it, even though he was barely 17 and had years before he'd move out. But sure, I'm the one whose space didn't matter. Brandon was born in August, right before my junior year started. I came home for a weekend to meet him. Cute kid. All babies are cute. But the family dynamic was insane. My parents were treating this baby like he was their own child, not their grandchild. Mom was getting up in the middle of the night for feedings. Dad was changing diapers and pushing the stroller around the neighborhood. Rachel was sleeping in and going out with friends while they did all the actual parenting. I watched this for 2 days and then went back to school. I called my mom once to gently suggest that maybe Rachel should be doing more of the parenting since, it was her kid. My mom got defensive immediately. She's adjusting, it's hard being a single mom, we're just helping out. Helping out turned into raising the kid. By the time Brandon was 1, my parents were doing everything. Rachel would feed him sometimes, change him when my parents insisted, but mostly she treated parenthood like an inconvenience. She'd gotten a job at a clothing store in the mall and worked maybe 20 hours a week. The rest of the time she was out with friends or on her phone. My parents never complained, never suggested Rachel get her act together, never encouraged her to go back to school or get a better job or maybe consider doing more for her own child. They just enabled everything and acted like they were blessed to be so involved. Meanwhile, I was drowning in student debt and working myself to exhaustion, and they couldn't even be bothered to ask how I was doing when I called home. College was rough, but I made it work. I'm talking 20-hour course loads, working 30 hours a week between 2 jobs, surviving on ramen and whatever free food I could scrounge from campus events. I didn't party, barely dated, and spent most weekends either working or studying. My social life was basically non-existent, unless you count study groups and awkward small talk with coworkers during shift changes. Junior year, I took 19 credits per semester because I'd failed one class freshman year and needed to make it up. Between classes and work, I was barely sleeping. I'd pull all-nighters to finish projects, then go straight to my morning shift at the bookstore, then go to afternoon classes, then do homework until 2 in the morning, sleep for 4 hours, and then repeat. I lived on energy drinks and spite. My roommate that year was this kid from a wealthy family who didn't work and had his parents paying for everything. He'd sleep until noon, skip classes, and still pass because he could afford tutors. Meanwhile, I'm surviving on 4 hours of sleep and perfect attendance because I couldn't afford to fail anything, or I'd lose my scholarship. The inequality was depressing as hell, but I kept going. I had a plan: graduate, get a good job, never look back. That plan was the only thing keeping me going when I was so tired I could barely think straight. Senior year was better in some ways, worse in others. My course load was lighter, but I'd picked up more hours at work to save money for after graduation. I needed first and last month's rent for an apartment, money to get my beat-up car fixed. Enough buffer to survive until my first paycheck from whatever job I landed. I was working 35 hours a week and taking 15 credits. Still brutal, but at least I could see the finish line. I'd applied to probably 50 jobs starting in January, sent out resumes, did phone interviews, drove 6 hours round trip for 2 in-person interviews. By March, I had an offer, a decent starting salary, good benefits, opportunities for advancement. The company wanted me to start in early June, right after graduation. Everything was lining up. Fast forward to February of my senior year. I was 4 months away from graduation, which was scheduled for Saturday, May 18th. I had already confirmed the date with my professors. My job had scheduled my start date for June 3rd, and I had my cap and gown ordered. This was a big deal for me. I was the first person in my family to get a 4-year degree. My parents both had associate degrees, and nobody else in my extended family had gone beyond high school. This was supposed to be my moment. I called my parents in early February to make sure they had the date on their calendar. My mom answered, and I heard Brandon screaming in the background about something. "Hey mom, just wanted to remind you that graduation is May 18th at 2 in the afternoon. The ceremony is about 2 hours and then there's a reception after. I can get you guys 4 tickets. There was a pause, then, "Oh honey, we're actually not going to be able to make it." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean you can't make it? I told you about this months ago." "Well, your father and I are taking Rachel and Brandon on a cruise that week. It's been really stressful for Rachel being a single mom, and we thought it would be good for all of us to get away. We leave on the 16th and come back on the 22nd. I sat there processing this information. They were going on a cruise during my college graduation, a cruise they apparently booked without checking if it conflicted with anything important. Mom, this is my college graduation. I've been working toward this for 4 years. You can't miss it for a cruise. Well, we already paid for it and it's non-refundable. Plus, Brandon is so excited. You understand, right? You're so independent. We figured you wouldn't mind. There it was. The classic excuse. I'm so independent that I don't need my parents at major life events. I'm so self-sufficient that I don't deserve basic support and acknowledgement. Cool. Are you serious right now? This is a huge deal for me. Oh, sweetheart, don't be dramatic. You'll have other big moments. This is Brandon's first vacation. You can celebrate when we get back. I wanted to scream. I wanted to point out that Brandon was 3 and wouldn't remember this vacation. That I had been working 2 jobs to put myself through college while they funded Rachel's extended adolescence. That maybe, just maybe, they could show up for me once. But I knew it wouldn't matter, so I just said, okay, and hung up. I was furious, but I told myself it was fine. I didn't need them there. I had friends who would come. I had my girlfriend at the time. I had professors who actually cared about my success. I'd celebrate without them and move on with my life. But of course, it got worse. About 1 week later, my mom called me again. I almost didn't answer because I was in the middle of studying for a thermodynamics exam. But something told me I should pick up. Hey honey, so I have a favor to ask. Oh boy, nothing good ever started with, I have a favor to ask. What's up? So we were thinking since you're not doing anything for graduation. I am doing something for graduation. I'm graduating. Right, but you don't have any family coming. So you're probably just going to walk across the stage and leave, right? So we were thinking instead of Kevin coming on the cruise with us, maybe he could stay with you that weekend, and you could watch Brandon. I literally laughed out loud. I couldn't help it. The audacity was stunning. Let me get this straight, you guys are going on a cruise during my graduation, which you're missing. And now you want me to skip my own graduation to babysit Brandon so Kevin doesn't have to go on the cruise? Well, Kevin really doesn't want to go, he has a gaming tournament that weekend. And Mom, I'm not skipping my graduation to babysit. It's just for 1 day. You'd still have your degree. The ceremony is just a formality. Just a formality. 4 years of busting my rear end. Tens of thousands in student loans. Countless all-nighters. 2 jobs, sacrifice after sacrifice, and my graduation ceremony was just a formality. The answer is no. But we already told Rachel you'd do it. She's counting on having this vacation. She's been so stressed. Then take Brandon with you or don't go. I'm not missing my graduation. You're being incredibly selfish right now. Family is supposed to help each other out. That word, selfish, coming from the woman who had just asked me to skip my college graduation so she could go on a cruise. The irony was completely lost on her. I'm not being selfish. I'm graduating college. You're asking me to miss one of the biggest days of my life for your convenience. It's not our convenience. It's Rachel's well-being. She needs this break. And honestly, after everything we've done for you, this is the least you could do. Everything they've done for me, like what exactly? Feeding me and housing me until I was 18, which is literally the legal minimum. Meanwhile, they were currently housing and feeding Rachel and Brandon with no end in sight, funding Kevin's gaming hobby, and planning vacations that I wasn't even invited to. Find someone else to watch Brandon. I'm going to my graduation. Fine, be selfish, but don't expect us to be there for you when you need something. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process what had just happened. My mother had just threatened to cut me off because I wouldn't skip my own college graduation to babysit my nephew, the same nephew whose vacation they had deliberately scheduled during my graduation. The math wasn't mathing. I called my dad later that night hoping he'd be more reasonable. He was not. Your mother told me about your conversation. I'm disappointed in you, son. We're not asking for much. You're asking me to miss my college graduation. It's a couple hours. You can go to the reception afterward. The ceremony starts at 2 in the afternoon. By the time it's done and we get through the reception, it'll be at least 6 in the evening. That's not a couple hours. Well, that's our offer. You watch Brandon for the day or you're on your own going forward. I've been on my own this whole time. Where were you when I needed help with tuition? When I was working 60-hour weeks between school and 2 jobs? When I was eating ramen for every meal because I couldn't afford anything else? We had to prioritize. Rachel needed to grow up and take responsibility for her choices, and you two enabled her instead. Don't talk about your sister like that. She's doing her best. I'm hanging up now. Enjoy your cruise. I hung up before he could guilt-trip me further. The next few months were tense. My parents would call occasionally to see if I'd changed my mind about watching Brandon. Each time I said no, each time they'd lecture me about family responsibility and how I was abandoning them when they needed me. The irony of them saying this while literally abandoning me on my graduation day continued to be completely lost on them. Rachel called me once to yell at me for ruining her vacation. I told her she ruined her own vacation by expecting everyone to accommodate her life choices. She called me some choice names and hung up. Kevin sent me a text that just said, "a jerk," which pretty much summed up his contribution to the situation. As graduation got closer, my parents made one last attempt. My mom called me 1 week before the ceremony. "We've decided to give you one more chance to do the right thing." I am doing the right thing. I'm going to my graduation. If you go through with this, don't bother coming home for holidays. Don't call us asking for money. Don't expect us to be at your wedding or meet your future kids. You're making a choice, and choices have consequences. I took a deep breath. You're right, choices do have consequences, and you're choosing a cruise over your son's college graduation. So, yeah, I won't be coming home for holidays. Not because you banned me, but because I don't want to be around people who treat me like an afterthought. Have a nice life. I hung up and blocked all their numbers. Best decision I ever made. Graduation day was amazing. My girlfriend, my 2 best friends from college, and 3 of my favorite professors came to watch me walk. We went out for a nice dinner afterward, and I felt genuinely happy. For the first time in months, I didn't need my family there. I had people who actually cared about me. I started my job 2 weeks later and dove into my career with everything I had. The company was a mid-sized manufacturing firm that produced industrial equipment, and I started as a junior project coordinator. The work was challenging, but I loved it. I was finally using my degree for something meaningful, working with people who valued competence over family politics. The first year was rough, new job, new city, learning curve steeper than anything in college. But I kept my head down and proved myself. I came in early, stayed late, volunteered for the projects nobody else wanted. Within 8 months, I'd streamlined 3 different processes that saved the company about $200,000 annually. My manager noticed. Year 2, I got my first promotion to project coordinator. It came with a 15% raise and actual respect from my colleagues. I started leading small teams, managing timelines, interfacing with clients. I was good at it, really good. The kind of good where people started specifically requesting me for their projects. During this time, I met Amy. She was an accountant at a firm that shared our office building. We'd see each other in the coffee shop on the ground floor, exchanged polite nods, until one day I was having a particularly terrible morning and she bought my coffee. She said I looked like I needed it. We started talking, exchanged numbers, and 6 months later, we were dating. Amy was different from anyone I'd dated before. She came from this big, warm family that actually liked each other. Her parents had been married for 30 years and still held hands. Her 3 siblings called her just to chat, not because they needed something. The first time I went to her family's house for dinner, I almost cried watching her dad ask her about her day and actually listened to the answer. This was what normal families looked like. Year 3 at the company, I got promoted again, this time to senior project coordinator. Another raise, bigger projects, more responsibility. I was managing teams of 8 to 10 people, coordinating multi-million-dollar equipment installations across 3 states. The stress was real, but so was the satisfaction. I was building something, making a name for myself. Nobody here cared that I was the forgotten oldest kid from a dysfunctional family. They cared that I got results. Amy and I got engaged that year. Simple proposal, nothing fancy. We were hiking, and I just asked her. She said yes before I could even get the ring out of my pocket. Her family threw us an engagement party, a big backyard gathering, tons of food, her relatives coming up to me all night telling me how happy they were to have me in the family. Her dad pulled me aside and said, "You're a good man. You treat my daughter right." I realized that was the first time a father figure had ever said anything like that to me. We got married 1 year later. Small ceremony, about 50 people, all Amy's family, and our friends. Not a single person from my biological family. Amy had asked if I wanted to invite them, and I'd been honest about everything. She held my hand and said, "Your wedding, your choice, but I'm here if you need to talk about it." I didn't need to talk about it. I needed to marry this woman and never look back. Year 5 at the company brought another promotion, senior project manager, a 6-figure salary, a corner office, the whole deal. I was 30 years old and making more money than both my parents combined ever did. I bought us a house. Nothing crazy, just a nice 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood, with a yard and a 2-car garage. The first time I put the key in that front door as the owner, not a renter. I stood there for a solid minute just processing it. This was mine. I'd earned this. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody could take it away. Amy's family helped us move in. Her dad and brothers hauled furniture while her mom and sisters unpacked boxes and organized the kitchen. Afterward, we ordered pizza and sat around our new living room laughing about how her brother almost dropped the couch down the stairs. This was family. This was what it was supposed to look like. I kept working, kept climbing. By year 7, a competitor firm tried to poach me with an offer I couldn't refuse. Senior project manager with a focus on international accounts, a 30% raise, better benefits, more autonomy. I took it. The new company was great, bigger projects, global clients, more resources. I was traveling some, which I actually enjoyed, Singapore, Germany, and Brazil. I was seeing the world while getting paid well for it. Meanwhile, Amy was killing it at her firm. She made partner the same year I switched companies. We celebrated with a nice vacation to Greece, stayed in a villa overlooking the water, ate amazing food, and just enjoyed being successful adults who'd earned every bit of what we had. At no point during any of this, the promotions, the engagement, the wedding, the house, any of it, did my biological family reach out. Not a card, not an email, nothing. And honestly, I was fine with that. I'd built a life that didn't include them, and it was a damn good life. Years 8 and 9 were more of the same. We settled into our life together. Amy and I hosted dinners for friends, took up hobbies, adopted a dog named Cooper, who we both loved more than reasonable adults should love a golden retriever. We talked about kids, but decided to wait a bit longer, travel more first, enjoy being dinks for a while, build up our savings. My career kept progressing. By year 9, I was managing the entire North American project portfolio for my company, a 20-person team, an 8-figure budget, projects across 12 states and 2 Canadian provinces. The responsibility was massive, but I thrived on it. My team respected me because I'd come up from the bottom. I knew what it was like to be the junior guy struggling. I mentored people the way I wished someone had mentored me. Then came year 10, a full decade since graduation, a full decade since my family chose a cruise over showing up for me. I'd honestly stopped thinking about them most days. They were like characters from a book I'd read once and mostly forgotten about. My wife knew bits and pieces about my family situation, but I didn't talk about it much. Ancient history, you know. I had moved on, built my own family. Life was good until Rachel's email arrived. About 10 years after graduation, I got an email from Rachel. The subject line was, "Important family matter." I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. I was at work between meetings and clicked it open more out of boredom than actual interest. The email was long and rambling, full of typos and weird formatting, like she'd written it on her phone while multitasking. But the gist was this. Dad had been diagnosed with early-onset Parkinson's disease about 6 months ago, and Mom had severe arthritis that made it difficult for her to handle daily tasks. They needed help. They needed family. They needed me. Rachel went on for several paragraphs about how difficult things had been. Dad's tremors were getting worse, and he couldn't do basic things like button his shirts or hold a coffee cup steady. Mom's hands were so bad she couldn't open jars or type on her phone without pain. They were both still relatively young. Dad was 64. Mom was 62, but their conditions were making them seem much older. She explained that she was doing her best, but she had her hands full with Brandon, who was now 13 and apparently going through a difficult phase. She didn't elaborate on what that meant, but knowing Rachel's parenting skills, I could imagine. The kid had been raised by grandparents who gave him everything, and a mother who treated him like an accessory. Shocking that he turned into a difficult teenager. Kevin, she wrote, was between jobs, shocking, and living in their basement, so he couldn't help much. He was dealing with his own stuff, which I translated to mean he was still playing video games 16 hours a day and contributing nothing to the household. Rachel mentioned he'd been trying to make it as a streamer, but it hadn't taken off yet. The kid was 28. If your streaming career hasn't taken off by 28, it's not taking off. They were looking at assisted living facilities, but they were expensive, like $4,000 to $6,000 a month. Expensive. Their insurance would cover some of Dad's medical care, but not housing or day-to-day assistance. They'd been trying to manage at home, but it was getting harder. Mom couldn't help Dad when he fell, which had happened twice in the past month. They needed someone there full-time, or at least someone to coordinate care. Rachel said she'd looked into hiring home health aides, but that was also expensive, and they'd already burned through a lot of their savings. She didn't specify on what, but I could guess. 10 years of funding Rachel and Kevin's lifestyles probably hadn't been cheap. The email took a manipulative turn in the last few paragraphs. She talked about how I was always the smart one and the one who got out and made something of himself. She said Mom and Dad were so proud of me and talked about me all the time. Complete garbage, but okay. She said they'd really love to reconnect, that life was too short for family grudges, that they all missed me. And then came the actual ask, would I be willing to move closer to help out? My job was probably flexible, right? I could work remotely or find something in the area. Or if I couldn't move, could I at least contribute financially to their care, maybe help with some of the medical bills or the cost of home health aides? Even $1,000 or $2,000 a month would make a huge difference. The entitlement was breathtaking. 10 years of silence, and now they needed something, so suddenly I was family again. 10 years of not giving a damn where I was, what I was doing, whether I was alive or dead. 10 years of no birthday cards, no Christmas calls, no hey, just checking in texts. But now that they needed money and free labor, suddenly I'm the smart one they're proud of and talk about all the time. I let the email sit in my inbox for 1 week before responding. My wife thought I should just ignore it, but I wanted them to know exactly how I felt. Here's what I wrote back. Rachel, thanks for reaching out after a decade of silence. I was interested to hear about mom and dad's health issues. However, I'm afraid I won't be able to help. You see, I'm incredibly selfish. Mom made that very clear to me 10 years ago when she told me I was being selfish for choosing to attend my own college graduation instead of babysitting Brandon so you guys could go on vacation. Since I'm so selfish, it wouldn't be fair to mom and dad to have to rely on someone like me during this difficult time. I'm sure you, Kevin, and Brandon can handle this. You're family after all, and family is supposed to help each other out. You know, like how family is supposed to show up for major life events, or like how family isn't supposed to threaten to cut off contact when you don't get what you want. I've built a good life for myself without you all, and I'm going to keep it that way. Mom and Dad made their choice when they chose a cruise over their son's graduation. They chose again when they issued ultimatums instead of apologizing. Actions have consequences, and these are theirs. I genuinely hope you figure something out, but it won't involve me. Please don't contact me again, unless it's an obituary notice. I'd at least want to know when to send flowers. Best of luck with everything. I hit send and blocked her email address. My wife asked if I felt guilty. I didn't, not even a little bit. These people had shown me exactly how much I mattered to them, and I was simply returning the energy. But Rachel, being Rachel, didn't give up that easily. She somehow got my work email address and sent another message. This one was more desperate. Dad's condition was declining faster than expected. Mom was struggling. They had medical bills piling up. Kevin was useless, her words, not mine, though I agreed. Brandon was acting out because of the stress. They needed help. They needed money. They needed me. She even threw in some guilt trips about how family is forever. You'll regret this when they're gone, and my personal favorite, they're your parents. You owe them everything. I forwarded the email to our information technology department and had her address blocked from the company's server. Problem solved. Months went by. I assumed that was the end of it. Then Kevin managed to find me on LinkedIn and sent me a message. This one was shorter and angrier. He called me a bunch of names I won't repeat here, said I was a terrible son and brother, and demanded I step up and be a man. The irony of Kevin, who was 28 years old and living in our parents' basement playing video games, telling me to be a man, was not lost on me. I didn't respond. I just blocked him and moved on with my life. But the best part, the absolute cherry on top of this Karma Sunday. About 1 year after Rachel's first email, my cousin Josh reached out. Josh and I had been pretty close as kids, but had drifted apart after I went to college. He apparently still talked to my parents occasionally and wanted to give me an update. Turns out Rachel had been telling everyone in the extended family that I had abandoned my parents in their time of need. She'd been painting herself as the dutiful daughter who was sacrificing everything to take care of them, while I was the selfish, ungrateful son who turned his back on his family. She'd been doing this whole martyrdom routine, collecting sympathy from aunts and uncles and cousins. Josh thought I should know because he'd recently found out the truth. He'd gone to visit my parents and found out that Rachel was barely helping at all. She was living in their house rent-free, sure, but she wasn't doing anything to actually care for them. She made mom and dad pay for groceries, wouldn't help with medical appointments, and spent most of her time on her phone or out with friends. Brandon was apparently a nightmare teenager who treated my parents like servants. And Kevin, still in the basement, still gaming all day, still contributing nothing. Meanwhile, they'd been telling everyone that they couldn't afford proper care because they had no family support. The reality was, they'd blown through most of their retirement savings funding Rachel's lifestyle and Kevin's gaming hobby over the years. The cruise they took during my graduation, that was apparently just one of many trips they'd taken with Rachel over the years, all while claiming they couldn't help me with college. Josh felt bad that he'd believed Rachel's version of events and wanted to set the record straight with me. He also wanted to know if the story about my graduation was true. I told him everything, the whole story, from the favoritism to the ultimatums to the emails a decade later. Josh was horrified. He said he wished he'd known sooner because he would have come to my graduation himself. I appreciated that, but told him it was ancient history. I had good people at my graduation. I didn't need the family that didn't want to be there. Josh then did something I didn't expect. He started telling the rest of the family the truth. He explained to our aunts and uncles what had really happened, Showed them receipts from old Facebook posts where my parents had bragged about cruises and vacations while I was working my way through college, and basically dismantled Rachel's victim narrative piece by piece. The fallout was spectacular. Extended family members started reaching out to me to apologize for believing Rachel's lies. A few of my aunts even offered to contribute to my parents' care, and then withdrew their offers when they realized how my parents had treated me. Uncle Frank, who's always been the blunt one in the family, apparently told my dad straight up that he'd made his bed and now had to lie in it. My parents, faced with the reality that their extended family now knew the truth, tried one last Hail Mary. They had my mom's sister, Aunt Linda, call me. Aunt Linda had always been nice to me, so I actually answered. She tried the gentle approach, explained that my parents were struggling, that they'd made mistakes, that they were sorry. She asked if I'd be willing to at least talk to them, maybe find some way to help. I listened to everything she had to say. Then I asked her a simple question. Did they actually say they were sorry, or are you just assuming they would be? Long pause. Well, they didn't use those exact words, but I'm sure they feel that way. That's what I thought. Aunt Linda, I appreciate you trying to help, but the answer is still no. They had 10 years to apologize. They didn't reach out when I got my first promotion, or when I bought my house, or when I got married. They only reached out when they needed something from me. That's not family. That's opportunism. But they're your parents, and I was their son, was past tense. They made it very clear that I only mattered when I was useful to them. Well, I'm not useful to them anymore, and they don't matter to me. I'm sorry you got dragged into this, but my answer is final. She tried to argue a bit more, but eventually gave up. I haven't heard from her since. That was 2 years ago. From what I understand through the grapevine, my parents ended up having to sell their house and move into a smaller apartment. Rachel and Brandon moved in with them, which I'm sure is going great for everyone involved. Kevin apparently finally got a job at a call center, but still lives with them. They're all miserable, crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment, struggling financially and dealing with the consequences of decades of poor choices. To better understand the nature of the problem, let's temporarily set aside the emotions of the main character and analyze this series of events from a broader perspective. The parents' blatant favoritism and eventual financial ruin after funding Rachel's lifestyle, and Kevin's gaming hobby highlight a widespread cultural trap. Society often weaponizes concepts like family harmony and unconditional sacrifice to demand that the responsible child quietly endure neglect while the favored children are endlessly coddled. The protagonist was expected to raise himself while his parents focused entirely on his siblings. Decades later, his sister still attempted to use the manipulative facade of family being forever to guilt him into providing financial and physical care. This toxic loop is not merely a private family flaw. It is a profound reflection of how cultural expectations of filial duty are frequently manipulated to excuse parental irresponsibility and sibling entitlement. As I look at how this protagonist successfully built a fulfilling life entirely independent of his biological family, I want to tell you that choosing your own peace is never an act of betrayal. When he firmly told his aunt that his parents only reached out when they needed something, and that their actions were pure opportunism, he was doing something incredibly brave. We are so often conditioned to believe that drawing a firm boundary, especially one that leaves ailing parents and dependent siblings crammed into a struggling 2-bedroom apartment, is synonymous with destroying the family. But let me assure you, walking away from a dynamic that only values you for your usefulness is not destruction, it is beautiful self-preservation. It takes immense emotional courage to look at the people who deliberately abandoned you on your graduation day and refuse to be their safety net when the heavy consequences of their poor choices finally arrive. Setting things right sometimes means allowing others to lie in the bed they consciously made for themselves, thus breaking the generational cycle of enablement once and for all. It is a powerful, necessary reminder that blood ties do not automatically entitle anyone to your hard-earned success, especially when those exact same people previously threatened to cut you off for simply prioritizing your own monumental life achievements. As we close this chapter, I leave you with one final thought. If you were faced with aging parents who explicitly discarded you in your youth to favor your siblings, but now desperately needed your financial help to survive a devastating crisis of their own making, would you maintain your protective boundaries to preserve the healthy life you built? Or would immense societal guilt somehow compel you to step back into that toxic environment to care for them?